Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Magdalena Kaili. On behalf of the European Law Observatory on New Technologies, ELONTech, I would like to welcome you to another webinar on digital identities in collaboration with NGI, IoT Council, and fantastic Rob van Kranenburg. I will be very short in my introduction, and I will leave the floor to our fantastic guest speakers today. Because it's we're almost closing this year, and we wanted to have as much more interesting material to share with you before this year finishes. And this webinar is part of the series that we started on June with Rob. We collaborated with the STOA committee from the European Parliament, and ever since we organized 2 more webinars on digital identity on July and August, and some more followed. And this is it, the December webinar on digital identity that we wish to have as much as more fruitful outcomes that will end up to a report that we wish to share with official institutes and authorities of the European Union. I'm not sure if my reception is the best, and if you can hear or see me.
But we can hear you.
Okay.
So that's the most important thing.
I leave the floor to you, and Rob, you may arrange the discussion, moderate the discussion with our guest speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Magdalena. It's indeed we're closing the year, but it seems like the European Union is moving tremendously fast now with all the work that we see yesterday on platforms, on data, cybersecurity is like something has erupted, and that's why we're here, of course, to talk about that. And we have 5 speakers, and they're all going to have a very brief presentation, but of course we will make a report. The report will be on ngi.eu later. All the links and presentations and much more of each of the speakers will be there. So now they're just giving you a kind of a quick taste of what they are doing. We'll start with Irene. So Irene Hernandez, and she's the founder and CEO of Gattaca. And she's also part of the SDIF Lab program at the moment. And she will talk briefly about her solution, and also about the interoperability group that she started in SDIF Lab. So Irene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob. Again, in order to share my media, there are already 6 people on stage. Yeah, good. Thank you. Let me now share my screen. Good. Well, hello, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Irene Hernandez, and I'm the founder of Gattaca, which is a cybersecurity company that builds decentralized digital identity technology. Now, we all know that centralized authentication architectures are creating frictions to users that have to manage hundreds of passwords and to give up on private information over and over again. Businesses, on the other hand, concentrate so much sensitive information that they become honeypots for hackers and are spending millions of dollars in KYC and GDPR compliance. But everything is changing now, as Daniel may be able to tell you later. Decentralized technologies allow us to reshape the authentication model. Self-sovereign identity is a new authentication paradigm that puts the user at the center. It is a new way of managing our personal information, a single digital identity for all our services worldwide. So at Gattaca, what we do is to empower users with an ID wallet and with verifiable credentials so they can have passwordless, instant, and government-grade secured access to digital services. But we didn't stop there. We built a comprehensive identity platform that includes credentialing tools for issuing authorities and single sign-on authentication tools for service providers. Now, when we designed our technology, we first realized that governments, financial institutions, large corporations, they were all building their own dual key infrastructure. and because our vision was and is to create a new identity layer for the internet, we had to be interoperable with all of those layers. And that's what we did. Now, when we try to commercialize this technology, a recurrent question we received from verifiers is whether our verifier component was compatible with multiple wallets. And the short answer was no, or not yet, because the few wallets that are now appearing in the market, they all have their own governance protocol and data models. And honestly, the ecosystem is becoming increasingly complex because now there are companies issuing tools for authorities and verification tools, verified credentials verification tools. So interoperability, enabling wallet interoperability is way more complex. So when we looked specifically at our verifier component, it worked very smoothly with our wallet. But if we wanted for it to be able to integrate with other wallets, what we could do on the first hand is to open our APIs. And we looked at approaches from other providers where to simply develop their own code, their own translation code inside their verifier components in order to be able to talk to those other wallets. Now, building this small driver for each new technology is complicated because you don't only need to be able to request and receive verified credentials. You really need to resolve the IDs. You really need to understand who the issuer is and their legitimacy. You need to understand how to read that specific credential. And lastly, the revocation system. Is that credential still valid? Not to mention the complexity of the different DLTs or even private databases. So we looked at the standardization market and we realized that there were a few initiatives out there that were very nice. For instance, the DID universal resolution. So we didn't have to develop on our verifier component that driver anymore because this interface has been already standardized. There are some attempts also to presentation exchange. And what we decided to do is not only to open our APIs, but to define the specs to bridge the gap, to define APIs, standard APIs, so that any new company could build a verifier component fully compatible and very simple, so to speak, to build very scalable interoperability. And that's what we did as part of our work at the SCF lab. We initiated an interoperability group and we had a very good reception. We have already 12 organizations involved in the initiative. And we're talking to standardization organizations in order to be able to provide continuity to these efforts and make it as a standard in the long term. So the question is, can we build a draft spec that can become eventually a groundwork for a verifier universal interface? That's what we're doing right now with the verified universal interface interoperability working group. I'll take questions if we have time. Thank you.
Irene, if that's okay with you, we'll take the questions sort of together after all the presentations.
Sweet.
And then sort of quickly sort of to ask you about this interoperability working group that you're having, that you specifically set up because you realized that you could have a very good and viable, productive niche solution basically. But we also know that the pie is immensely great and the cake is like enormous. So you realize that you, as a kind of solution provider with an architecture, had to basically also not only talk to your competition, but actually invite the competition in and create with them this kind of interoperability layer. And so this working group that you're hosting now within SIF, that's also open to anyone who wants to join, I guess, right? So
that is right. We are opening it. We're talking to many organizations, not only in Europe, but worldwide, in order to invite experts, companies working in the space, so we could integrate their inputs in the spec so as to make it as generic as possible and as useful as possible.
Perfect. So again, sort of in the report, and then they will put up later, and that everybody who's accessing here will put up the link to that group. You can also put it in a chat if you want. If there's a kind of invitation to the Slack channel, So if you want to put any information in the chat for anyone, that would be.
Yeah, we have a sign-up sheet. I have to say here that the group is in its early stages, so it was born a month ago, and we've made great progress. We already have a draft spec, but as a group, we're 1 month old, and we have a registration form that I can share with you all, so that anyone can
Perfect.
join.
Seems like this is the new Europe. We're doing things as fast as they're doing on the coast. That's the idea. So thanks, Irene. Petros?
Thank you.
Thank you. Petros, you also have a slide that you wanted to show us and also briefly give your overview of what you're working on.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I think Irene presented nicely emerging challenge in the digital identification sector, which is the decentralized identities. This new flavor exists with more traditional flavors, the centralized identities. We have a lot of centralization in the identity provision within the private companies or the governments. They provide identities to their employees. We have also federated identities. It's not only Google and Microsoft and Facebook. We have also the academic networks, which efficiently provide this kind of federated identity. So there is a lot of things. There are a lot of things happening in the digital identity sector because digital identity is an opportunity. Through digital identities, we have more data sharing, and of course, we have better and more secure access to public and business services. But digital identity is also full of risks. And the problem is that with digital identity, we create electronic, digital, large-scale personal databases, and this creates an obvious risk. Honeypots for cybersecurity invaders, and of course the risk of misusing this personal data without the proper control of the user. We need, as a result, a new generation of privacy safeguards, a new generation of privacy technologies that are automated in the sense exactly that business process management is automated and eventually scalable to address different security concerns, and especially the integration of personal data, ID data, with behavioral data and health data. This is also a new challenge. I want to give an example. There is an opportunity here with the 5G and Wi-Fi 6 network and technologies to power connected business, to implement in situ wireless and mobile networks. And this is going to happen now with smart factories, Industry 4.0, but also smart shopping malls, airports that can be quickly evacuated, also cruise and passenger ships that adopt these technologies, and through these technologies can capture the location of people. This is very important. We have a lot of indoor positioning technologies now. For example, in passengers and crew, I report from a project we run now. It's called Palaimon Project, and it's part of the H2020, where we exactly establish these identities overseas in the ships that are far away from the ports in order to have smart evacuation management. But not only that, if we use the same technology we may have location-based services of high value potential for the cruise ships and the passenger ships during a travel. So this possibility creates the risk to store large amount of very personal data. We know perhaps how to protect that, but this data now, they are not in the hands of government officials or regulated telecom operators, but in the hands of non-regulated operators that may misuse or manipulate this data. So for that reason, we need this kind of new generation of user-centric EIT systems, decentralized technologies, as Irene presented before. But decentralization is not something that's plug and play. In order to have efficient decentralization, you need to have an efficient governance rules-based system, and perhaps not a promise-based governance system, but a standards-based governance system. We have this experience in Europe because we organized in that way the electronic signature that protects the privacy and the security of the documents, and also gives the possibility to easily exchange signed documents based exactly in the adoption of the governance standards. Some ideas, we can discuss perhaps them later. When we are exposed to the networks and these networks capture our location, we need perhaps cold network zones initiated by the user, where the user is protected, the system ends in the frontiers of the zones and is working only for emergency reasons. Or we may need structural anonymity. The anonymity is a new word that is used now a lot, even in the official government, EU or US Congress documents. But this structural anonymity means, in my view, unleakability. We need to ensure the non-leakability of the different data stores and credentials a user may dispose, and eventually disposable yet official identities. This is a concept we have presented recently. It builds on top of the self-sovereign identity systems trajectory, and wants exactly to implement identities that can be forgotten, that they are not permanent, they are only context specific and time specific, so we can move by using this identity without really presenting to everybody our real identity. So this is some of these ideas. We can eventually discuss more in the next in the discussion that follows these presentations. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you, Petros. I mean, this is these are very exciting concepts, right? The cold network zones and the structural anonymity, and of course, then the whole question about the friction between structural anonymity, accountability, sort of the system when it has to go into society is. These questions are being foregrounded, and you point to them because you ask and you also explain that we need new forms of governance. And I think that's a perfect bridge to go to Tibo, because Tibo is working on these new forms of governance, if I may say, and he has very sort of clear vision on this. So Tibo, maybe you want to take the floor.
Thank you, Rob. Clear vision, I don't know, because it's an ongoing process, and we are learning every day. So let's be humble towards those questions that are very complex. But very, very shortly about the foundation that I represent. I am the president of a public utility foundation that was set up in Belgium in September. So it's very recent. We've been recognized by the King of Belgium, because that's the way public utility foundations are recognized officially by the King of Belgium. So we are like a Linux foundation, but for promoting the advent of a new internet, which is the merger of the TCP/IP protocol and the blockchain protocol. So it's a novel proposal, doesn't exist. We believe that that's the next stage of the internet. That's our conviction. Many people have worked on the proposal, the technical proposal that we made public in September through a white paper that is available. I will share the website of the Euro Foundation, which is available on our website, euro.org. And it's a technical proposal to allow that merger. I will explain what it allows, notably in terms of digital identity. To put it very simply, with that proposal, it becomes possible to have a decentralized identity, which is native to the internet itself, like many other services that are services we use every day that we call universal services. That's why the name of the foundation is for Internet of Universal Resources. On top of the list of those services, of course, there is the digital identity, but that's not the only service that we can make universal, meaning native to the internet. Search engine can become native. Emailing can become native. Computing power, artificial intelligence can become native. Data storage and GDPR concerns become also native to the internet, and more and more. So to get back to the digital identity, basically, it's a SSI, a self-sovereign identity that is native to the internet, plus the possibility to combine this with other native services like confidentiality and traceability. And that leads also to the possibility to have a native electronic signature to the internet with the highest level of security, level 3 if we comply with EIDAS regulation, the level 3 electronic signature of EIDAS, where to have the highest level of legal certainty, you need a third party, which is accredited authentication provider. With our proposal, it becomes native to the internet. So you don't even need a third party, because digital identity plus confidentiality plus traceability, both native to the internet protocol, lead to a native level 3 electronic signature. So we are resolving many issues of the digital agenda of Europe in just one proposal. And so when you have an SSI, a self-sovereign identity, which is native to the internet, I can explain in more details if there are questions how it works, but I'm trying to be concise and not to complicate it in my explanation, because if it is too technical, I might lose some of you. So pardon me if I am not explaining the actual technical solution. I can, if there are questions. But let's say that once you have an SSI, which is native to the internet, what does it mean? It means that the user can decide if, one, he will use his real identity. What does it mean, his real identity? It means an identity which has been certified, meaning electronically signed by the competent public authorities in his own country. It could be the government, it could be the post, it could be even a third party which is recognized by the government as able to provide those credentials that are official, and everything is signed by the native ID of the public authorities. Everything is intertwined. And so the user can choose either I am signing, for instance, a Zoom session. We are having, it's not Zoom we're using, but kind of. Let's imagine that we are discussing, and both parties would like to sign the discussion. He can use his digital ID native to the internet to sign that session. It could form a contract, because native to the internet, you have also traceability. So we know exactly what we are signing, because it's traceable through the decentralized internet we are proposing. And or the user can decide, no, I want to be anonymous, or I want to be pseudonymous. Anonymous, I don't want to have any connection to my identity. Pseudonymous is very granular. I decide what elements of my identity I will share. It could be a real nickname, or it could be just some elements of my identity, like my age, or just a calculation of my age to show I have above majority, but without disclosing my age. It's very granular, and I can decide if I am making this communication confidential or not. This is one also of the advantages of universal services which are native to the internet. Everything becomes granular, not just the digital identity, but also the confidentiality, but also the traceability of everything I do becomes self-sovereign. It's not just a digital identity. That's why I'm trying to message to you is that if we engage in that form of new internet, it's the self-sovereignty is not just on the digital identity, but on every aspect of my interaction with the digital world. And so our conviction is that the European Commission should have a look at that sort of proposition. What we are doing is just in the air. There are other projects that, and many of them we are in interaction with them, like Solid, like Definity, like Tron, like Threefold, and just mentioning them, which share the same philosophy as our philosophy. So it's where they're using blockchain as a peer-to-peer network where much more than just cryptocurrencies can be exchanged. We are in line with those projects, but the difference here is that we are at the level of the protocol of the internet. We are at the level of the TCP/IP protocol. So what we are proposing is that would be native to the internet. It's an enormous shift.
Yes,
and
it's very much,
yeah.
Yes, it's very much, I would say, like it's a mindset shift, right? Sort of, it's very this sort of like you already come with these new with words, but it really is also about a story and storytelling. That's extremely important because you're basically describing a huge mind shift here. Can you put some of the links in the chat? Because people are asking for it, and so can you put the foundation in the chat and some of the things? So sure. Thank you very much. So we move to Anuba.
Thank you.
Anuba Sinya. And so you're working in India, and of course in India we have lots and lots of discussion on identity and identity frameworks. And with your center, you basically are doing a lot of research on digital identity, and you've also sort of built some, or you're working on building some kind of a model that can explain to local, regional, but also national governments a kind of procedure that they could follow when they think about implementing digital identity. So yes, please enlighten us about your work.
Thanks, Rob, and hello to everyone from India. I'm Anubha, and I work at the Center for Internet and Society. I'm based out of Delhi in India. We are a policy and academic research think tank, about 12 years old, and work at the intersection of policy, technology, internet from a public interest perspective. Some of you may have heard about the Indian National Digital Identity System, that's known as Aadhaar. And CIS's interest in digital identity began in the early part of this decade as the Aadhaar project, which currently has over 1 billion Indians enrolled, began to take shape on ground. So over the decade in India, some of the most contentious and high stakes and high decibel policy discourse in tech policy has actually happened around this digital identity system. So at CIS, apart from interrogating the present form of the system that was taking shape on ground, we also started to think about how to engineer digital identity systems more thoughtfully, especially to incorporate values of accountability, privacy, trust from the very beginning. We also learned that these digital identification systems have legacies, and there are many subsystems that need to come together to produce desired outcomes. So I'll introduce a couple of outputs and the research lines we've been working on, and then I'll come to the model that Rob mentioned in the beginning. So our interest led us to develop research from many lenses or methods, policy and legal. We've used design research, we've used technological surveys, etc. We did not want to restrict ourselves to merely being critical about the typically poorly designed governance frameworks of these digital identity systems, especially since that was something that we were observing happening a lot in global south. We also wanted to study the design of these systems, the actors involved, the processes, show the weak points, and also break down the complex structures of different types of ID systems, especially systems that we weren't very familiar with in India, for example, with federated systems or decentralized systems. So we've looked at about 4 ID systems in our research as well. We've tried to, boil it down to the nitty-gritties in terms of relationships, in terms of data flows, so on and so forth. And we call them as exploratory research maps. The other part of this problem is that a lot of the standards that you need to sort of in some way implement in the technology are legal standards. These get conceptualized in law or in courts, and they're very important in understanding the legitimacy, the future legitimacy of ID systems as we continue to fine tune our own systems or design newer systems. This is very important because the law around privacy is very much in development around the world, and privacy infringements and the justification for privacy infringements vary across the world, and they're very finely drawn. So we are also following judgments from top courts across the world to understand what are the various bright lines or not that courts have drawn, and what have courts mentioned about these systems and their functioning. Finally, at this point in time, we're also looking at what are the kind of technologies in use, in the market and as well as available otherwise, that are embedded across the life cycle of the ID system. We completed a survey in October where we rated these technologies across 6 parameters. These were security, privacy, accuracy, cost, scalability, and maturity. So coming to the model that is going to be the highlight of our 2-year research, and that's something that we only begin sort of researching on. So based on our learnings, my team is attempting to create a decision tree or a decision model, which is supposed to be like a handbook or a stepwise and a stage-wise guide to policymakers for making policy and technological decisions in designing a digital identity system. So here we're trying to start from the beginning. That is at the stage where there is some governmental officer deciding that his or her country needs a digital identity system for a certain purpose to achieve a certain country goal. So for example, if they're trying to digitize the identification infrastructure to improve financial inclusion, so we will try to identify what are the various kind of factors that have driven this decision. Are they really justified? Where have these worked? And what are the factors which may have prevented them from, achieving the intended goals? Then in the next stage, we will see which purposes and which goals are best suited for certain kind of identification infrastructures. Federated, centralized, decentralized, etc. Parallelly, we also intend to highlight how the governing law and regulatory structures should be designed, should be thought about and structured. So at the moment, like I mentioned, we've begun our preliminary research, and I'm excited for the potential for this sort of a framework. At CIS, we intend to post regular updates on, the research in this phase, and also the design process on our website. I'm sharing a link to it right after my talk. I invite you all to visit the website or follow us on Twitter. And thanks to Rob for inviting me here. And I would love to hear further thoughts from the audience as well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and we're very excited because it's very timely, your work, and we need this kind of decision tree of all kinds of policymakers, local, regional, and national, also on European and more even global level, to think about how these digital identity systems should be designed with these 6 parameters in mind, and really discussing the balance between these parameters. I mean, so we would love to work closely with you and more with you with this model. And so also please put some links in the chat if you want to the research, and also to the digital identities research that you're doing, because it's very extensive. And I think it would be great to get more cooperation also on this kind of, especially with the kind of 1 billion framework that you basically are and talk about. And sort of we're thinking in this 500 million zone of framework, and so basically all these solutions are interesting, and also maybe it's interesting to get some people joining the Interop working group at SF Lab on especially on the Gattaca solutions that are there. And so talking about the 500 million zone, we go to the man who is designing the 500 million zone, Daniel. So Daniel, you maybe want to sort of give your ideas a little bit about what you've been hearing, and maybe also update us a little bit about the speed that's happening in the European Union at the moment. What we see with this seems to be a tremendous consensus politically on the urgency of data and identity. And so maybe you can say a little bit about that.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Rob, and happy to be here. I'm not designing this whole system myself, of course. I'm happy to be working with a lot of people, also people from this panel, but also people from in the chat. So happy to do that. There is indeed a sense of urgency, or also a big momentum in Europe, but I think in the whole world, to see how can we, as the former speakers has already mentioned, how can we empower that citizen? How can we empower him to give his the identity, his data back? And for that, you need a few things. A few things that are all mentioned. You need research, you need technology, you need aspect, you need governments, and you need regulations. From our part, and our part I speak on behalf of the European Blockchain Partnership, we're trying to see, okay, how can public services, how can governments fit into this new paradigm? Because in Europe, we want to hand over the key to the citizens, but we want to hand it over in a way that he is fully empowered, not giving something that he will be selling or giving into other corporations. We need something, a framework, we need a context where the citizen is also safe and protected. And that is exactly what we are doing in kind of the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework, which I'm a convener of. We try to see what are the best ways to do that. How can public services be transformed into ways that could support that paradigm that Irene has mentioned, that we have that easy interaction with the issues and the relying party. How can we empower that from the public service? We need, of course, for that our specifications. We need also the necessary capabilities, which we are currently now building, but we'll be also needing some regulations. And that's for very interesting is also next to the project on the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework. Europe is also looking at, and very intense moment now, to see what could be the new European e-identity. From what I hear and from what are the first signals, Europe will be heavily inspired by the SSI concepts. Because as you may have heard President von der Leyen speaking, she was about saying, okay, that new European identity needs to be something that empowers, that is privacy driven, that is putting the citizen at the heart of these interactions. And then if you go to those kind of motivation principles, you're coming very closely to what is happening on decentralized identity and SSI. So we see that Europe wants to take a lead on this. It has not been fully conceptualized on the technological or on a governance level or on a regulation level, but we see that we are moving into the right direction. Yeah. So next year will be a very interesting year. We'll be having things that from our side will be ready with a version 2 so that we can first pilot certain things on decentralized identity, on linking public services with those kind of things. We'll be also investing a lot of more and try to interact with those kind of things. But next to that, we'll be seeing that the new EIDAS revision will be also looking at new ways of how to include decentralized identities. So you get a lot of movements now happening, and also the things that are being loose, to have in 2021 a very important aspect or important evolution and transition. In the next stages, I will be working on that, stabilize our version, try to see how also we interact with the market players. Because don't let you be fooled by all the things I say about from in the public sector. It is, in a good European way, something that we want to do together with the private market. So we want to have on the digital identity a good balance. And I think I call it in my Eurocentric way, so pardon me for the global audience, but a good European balance between private sector involvement and public sector involvement. We see models in the rest of the world where that balance is out of not good aligned, but we need to do that. So in that new identity, there will be possibilities for private corporations, for private initiatives, but also for public initiatives. Always to be clear that we empower those kind of citizens. And that is also the action that Europe will take, and the funding that they will provide to support people like Gattaca, like what is happening with SF Labs. So there will be more power to do that, because, and that's why I want to end, these are important initiatives, but we don't need to underestimate the big transition that is awaiting us. This is something, a very big, important paradigm shift. You have a lot of legacy systems, a lot of legacy concepts that are now in place. You want to evolve them to the fully decentralized ways. So we need to see what kind of road do we take to from there. Do we go by hybrid solution? Do we go by fully those kind of things? So those are the big challenges that we have on behalf of those kind of things. So Rob, I hope that gives you a bit an overview.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much, Daniel. I think, I mean, these are exciting times. And of course, after this awful 2020, we're all in need of a very good 2021. And so we need some, and I think we have this kind of, this positive flow. I think we feel it sort of everywhere. And indeed, it's not the case of let's say, Europe and global or something. If we take it down to the level of attributes and citizens, we have only citizens on the planet, basically, right? Sort of in different federated sort of kind of models that then are being envisaged. And I think maybe like GDPR, which we see now having a fantastic uptake across the planet, sort of things can come from certain region, but things can also come from India, where we have good practice. So it's about really exchanging all of this. And so I think what I would like to ask any one of you, and I see a lot of things happening in the chat, but again, this will be in the report, and for the speakers, if you want to put more things in the chat, please do it, because we can also take it up, but you can also send us presentations later. We'll take this up. But just quickly for all speakers, a quick reaction. You have about 10 minutes. And the question then is sort of, and maybe we'll start with Daniel. So Daniel, so for this vision to succeed, what is it that you're missing most, or what is it that you lack most in your current practice? If you could have like one or two words or one or two things that you miss most to make your vision real.
But I think the first thing that is missing, of course, is that first real successful use cases that is being implemented. I think everybody agrees on the concepts, everybody agrees on the principles, but now we need a big showcase to see, okay, this is really happening, this is what could be the potential being. If you have that sparkle, I think the rest will follow each other, but of course, we need to combine that many things together before this is rolling, that it takes some effort. You need to link those issuing parties or lying parties, so you need to have stable standards. At least as one of the first use cases in a real production setting will be rolling, then you'll be having some more traction, and that will be. And I think also public sectors can be playing a role by facilitating those kind of things and making it at this very early stage on a certain way more economically supportable, sustainable. So I think first half let's do in 2021 the first implementations of this, see that the concept is really worth what it's made the promise, and then I think the ball will be rolling.
Thank you, Daniel. Petros, sort of to make your vision real, what is it that you're missing most? What is lacking most in the ecosystem? Daniel is saying, is the use cases success that we are missing? Do you agree? Do you have other ideas?
Yes, use cases are always important. I think we need also to build more networks of action where the technologies will meet the policy persons and others. They express what the society needs. I believe we need to build the structures. These interdisciplinary projects and projects where we co-create things. The digital identity is not a technical issue. It's a very societal one. And we need to create a consensus. And we need to create a form of large knowledge of what is going on. And I believe through these networks, more networking, more involvement of the private sector, because the digital identity in the first phase was something that it is only for the something that came out from government applications. We need to give incentives to private sector to participate in these networks, and of course we need to listen to the citizens, how citizens envision all these kind of things. I remind the concerns of the citizen regarding the COVID-19 tracing apps. We need to understand these concerns, and we need to implement systems that respect these concerns.
Thank you, Petros. Yes. I think a story is forming. And Tibo, what would be your answer to the question? What is it that you're lacking most now? What is it that you're missing most to make that vision real? Tibo?
Can you hear me?
Tibo?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, because I have a problem with my earphones.
Oh.
Okay, so that's what we need. That's your question?
Basically, what you're missing, what is it that you lack most to make that vision real?
Yeah, what we miss today, we are just at the stage of the white paper. We need now to come up with a POC, as I explained in my in a chat to someone who asked the question about, is it realistic to use a blockchain technology because it's too slow, not scalable, etc. We all know that. I replied, yes, you're right, but that's why we need a completely new novel blockchain protocol with new features that doesn't exist today. And so we need to work on this. We have the general outline and design of the protocol, that blockchain protocol. We know how we can make it, but we need now to develop it through a POC. And based on this, then we will be able to come up with other POCs concerning the actual provision of the services, the universal services. It's a 3-year. We anticipated it would be a 3-year roadmap to make it happen. The blockchain protocol plus the first universal services, and including the first among them, digital identity. And to do so, we will need financial support. That's why we're going to apply for the new funding programs of the European Commission, like NGI, of course, and but other sort of we are foundation, like Linux Foundation, as I said. So we need also political support. When I look at the arsenal launched by the European Commission to combat the tech giants, good, okay, it's a necessary response, but it's not necessarily a vision for a new European, not European internet. It's not the right expression, because it could message that the internet would be fragmented, which is not what we want. But a European vision of what the internet should be in the future, I think that initiatives like ours should be looked at by the European Commission closely, so that the European Commission is not just in a responsive attitude towards the tech giants.
Thank you. Yes, that's thank you very much. Anuba, sort of what is it, sort of, if you say, what is it that you're missing most now? What are you lacking most to, for example, if you want to sort of push that model and get it also on the level of this huge political sort of issues that are happening in India at the moment, sort of.
Sure. So the first thing off my mind would be we're still lacking proper accounts, empirical accounts, or case studies, or sort of scientifically, so to speak, robust evidence of the people who have sort of experienced various kinds of systems. Why this is necessary is to examine whether the purpose for which digital identity systems are originally built do indeed contribute to the stated goal. But slowly there are stories trying to come out. But in order to create a robust model that can stand the test of the harshest critic scrutiny, and also be persuasive and convincing for governments to be considered an authority and a model to be sort of looked into, I think it's necessary that we urgently find or sort of source the best possible evidence available. As a social science researcher, I think that's really, really important for us to be informed by.
I think this also ties in very much in what Petros was saying, that it's a technical issue, but it's also very much a social issue. It's also about new forms of democracy and new forms of inclusion, and so as sort of this interdisciplinarity with the work that you're doing and the technical development, they basically should be a little bit more parallel. But we see that sort of happening now. Sort of we see these things happening, and that's really good. So thanks a lot, Anuba, and thank you for bringing this perspective. Irene, sort of to close with you, sort of you already have basically set up a working group on interoperability because you were missing some kind of things. You're already doing it, but to really kickstart the vision, your vision, what is it that you're sort of lacking most at the moment? What is it that you miss most at the moment?
Definitely being able to demonstrate with real and tangible use cases is what I think we need at this point. And the way to achieve that, from my conversations with pioneering organizations that really want to push this forward and move to the next stage, is a sandbox environment, a safe regulatory and legal environment where they may dare to try. I think that's really missing. My conversations with, especially with organizations that are not deeply involved within the community, they fear that, well, but is this legal? Is there a regulatory framework for this? How can we try this? And how does this match with other regulations where there may be some overlap? So this uncertainty can be solved with sandbox environment where these organizations could start trying, and this is what is needed in order to have all of those use cases that trigger adoption.
I think this is such an important remark that I would like to give over to Daniel just a little bit because this is really important. Sort of
Indeed,
this
what?
yeah, anticipatory regulation kind of thing. And if we get these questions on the ground, people asking sort of, is this legal? Is this sort of this may really put a big this may really hamper kind of the things that are happening on the ground. And
indeed.
so
That's also that's indeed perfect. Some concern that there is emerging. So within the EPSI infrastructure, there will be next to our production environment, pilot environment, also something that we call the EPSI sandbox to also have those kind of things. And there will be also some active support to also see some things that are not regulated at this current stage could be also tested in this. And that we have the more advanced stage where we use the full potential. At this current stage, we have a lot of possibilities within the current regulation, but they are, to be honest, in a suboptimal way. I talk about in European regulation, of course. So we need to see how this can be done. And maybe if I'm also allowed, Rob, also maybe come back to Tibo. I think that is very important what he mentioned. The European identity should not be something that is going to all directions. That you have freedom of all the things, that you have research project doing things, other things. So you need to have a stable vision in that. If not, you will be having too much diversity and it's going to lead nowhere. So you need, as a continent, I think every nation needs to have that vision, and then you can support actively doing that. I like to use always maybe the example of the American space dream that they have. They wanted to land in the moon. They had the vision. They want to do that, and then they organized everything about that, and that was a perfect public-private cooperation, and they finally get to the moon. So that is a vision, a moonshot, of course, to see that. But if we lack that, we're not going to the moon. Maybe we're going somewhere else. So it is very important what Tibo mentioned about those kind of vision.
Thank you, Daniel. I think with this we will end. And so on behalf of Magdalena, I want to thank all speakers for very interesting interventions. And again, we'll have a report and we'll put everything up there. And I think this conversation will continue. The next session we have on December 22, and then in January we'll have some next sessions. So all the participants, all listeners, all speakers, thanks a lot, and wish you all good and festive days into hopefully a better 2021, in which we are extremely aligned, as I hear it. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.